Bibliophiles of the internet, my name is Adriana, and can you believe that it's time for me to bring you my June wrap-up? That's right, ladies and gentlemen, we are in July. I really don't understand. I was a bit of a reading machine this month because in total I read 18 things. Now let me bring you the breakdown. The breakdown is 9 novels, 2 graphic novels, and 7 manga volumes. But damn, I'm impressed with myself. Okay? We obviously have a lot of material to get through right now, so I'm gonna stop yammering and get on to the books that I read this June. The very first book that I finished in June was Unspoken by Rees Brennan. I read this book because Ashley from Said the Story was hosting a Read Unspoken read-along, and I ended up really enjoying it so much that I made a review, so I don't really want to talk about what it's about or my thoughts about it because it's all in the review. And like I said in that review, I had a couple of minor qualms with it, but nothing really serious, and I still really enjoyed it. It's a super funny book and I love the protagonist, but I ended up giving that one a 4 out of 5 stars. And so the second book that I read in June was Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe by Benjamin Alire Sáenz. I loved this book so freaking much that not only did I make a review for it, which I will link in the description, but I bought it, as you can see, because I'm holding it. Basically, my love for this book is so strong, and I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars, and I cannot recommend it enough. The third book that I read this month was a middle grade book, and that was Escape from Mr. Lemoncello's Library by Chris Grabenstein. And it is about a boy named Kyle who wins the opportunity to go into Mr. Lemoncello's library. And Mr. Lemoncello is a very famous inventor of the games of all kinds. Kyle and some of his friends get the opportunity to be the first kids ever to attend this library. What happens is they have to participate in a lock-in, which is when they are locked in the library and they sleep in it overnight, but then they realize that it's actually a game. While I found this book to be a very entertaining and fun read, I really didn't think it was anything too special. The characters were extremely two-dimensional and flat. The dialogue at times was super cheesy, and I just think that the message that this book had to offer in the end wasn't anything new or unique, so I ended up giving it a 3 out of 5 stars. The next 6 things I read after that were the first 6 volumes of Monster by Naoki Urasawa. So this is like a crime psychological thriller kind of manga, and I first heard about it from Bridget at BriBookReviews. So this manga centers around a surgeon named Dr. Tenma. At the beginning of this story, he's struggling a lot with hospital politics because the people who are above him want him to operate and save the lives of people who they deem to be very important, like prestigious public figures and such. Finally, when he gets fed up with that, he decides to save the life of this boy, this seemingly normal boy. He performs surgery on this boy against his boss's wishes. And what happens is this boy grows up to be a mass serial killer. There's so much that's happening in this story, and I really am enjoying it because it's insanity. I have to say that it's really noticeable in Monster that the art seems a little bit aged, because I want to say that this manga series was first published like in the 90s, so it's a little bit older. It has its highs and its lows, but overall I'm really enjoying it. It's a definite roller coaster of a ride. The lowest I rated a volume was volume 5. I gave that 3.5 stars, but the highest that I gave was 5 stars to volume 3. So the next book that I read was The Bone Season by Samantha Shannon. And this is an adult fantasy novel about a girl named Paige. She lives in a futuristic society where clairvoyance has been outlawed. So she works in the criminal underground as a voyant, and one day she makes a very dire mistake which sends the authorities after her. I definitely had mixed feelings about this one because I was really enjoying it, but then I got to the end and the writing was just not strong enough. I don't know how to say it nicely. I'd say the last act, the last 70 or so pages were just utter chaos. There was no organization or structure to the end of the story, and all of the things that happened really kind of opened my eyes to some of the negative aspects of the writing. At the end of the day, I just don't know, because I enjoyed a majority of this book, and while I know that it has a lot of room for it to grow because I hear it's supposed to be a 7-book series, it's just hard for me to really judge it right now. But I ended up giving the first book, The Bone Season, 3 out of 5 stars. The next thing that I read was a graphic novel, and that was Level Up by Jean Nguyen Yang and Thien Pham. So this story follows a young boy as he enters into college. His parents really want him to go to medical school. He would have a really good chance of getting there if he weren't so super distracted by playing video games 24/7. But everything changes for him when his father suddenly passes away, because suddenly he is visited by a group of angels who insist that his destiny is to go to medical school and that they were sent by his father to help make this destiny a reality. I wouldn't say that this is a character-driven story because the main character and his group of friends, aka the supporting characters, weren't very fleshed out or distinctive or anything like that, but I think in the end this book was more about the message, and I appreciated that message. So I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars, and I really enjoyed it. The next book that I read was Jellicoe Road by Melina Marchetta, and this is a library book. This is a YA contemporary novel about a girl named Taylor Markham. When she was 11 years old, she was abandoned by her mother on this road called Jellicoe Road. She was taken in by a woman named Hannah and sent to this school in this area. So there's definitely a lot of drama for Taylor with that going on, but she also has all these questions about what happened to her mom, why did she abandon her, and then suddenly Hannah, the woman who took her in and the closest thing that she has to a mother, she disappears as well. This is another one that I kind of had mixed feelings about. I didn't necessarily have a problem with the writing. I thought especially the second half of this book was written very well. I thought there was a strong sense of emotion and purpose in this book, and I found it moving towards the end, but to me that wasn't enough to really make up for the beginning, which is kind of confusing. So while I really did enjoy this book towards the end especially, I just had some mixed feelings about it overall, and I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. After I finished with that, I read The 100-Foot Journey by Richard C. MORAIS. So this is the story about an Indian boy named Hassan. For him and his family, restauranteering and cooking have been in their blood for the longest time, for generations. While they had a successful restaurant in India, when some unfortunate circumstances forced them to leave the country, they eventually find another home in France. So they have a really big plan to open up a very grand Indian restaurant. The only problem is that 100 feet across the way, there is a very refined, renowned French restaurant owned by Madame Mallory. A little known fact about me, I love books that are about cooking, and the thing is there aren't very many out there that are good, and this is one of the good ones. I actually really enjoyed the writing style, and I enjoyed the mood of the story overall. I felt like it was something very familiar, very comforting. I think the author is really good at using vivid imagery and also creating a scene and setting up the scenery. It's a very visual book. That's a strange thing to say, but it all goes back to wonderful description. And while I did feel like there were some parts of this book that were maybe a tad convenient, some things that happened maybe a little bit too quickly for my liking, I still enjoyed it overall, and it was a very satisfying story, so I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. And as soon as I put down that book, I picked up Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. I'm sure you guys know that this series has recently wrapped up with Ruin and Rising, but I had never started this series before, and neither had my wonderful friend Penelope from Penelopes Picks. She and I buddy read this, and it was like one of the best reading experiences ever. So this is a book about an orphan girl named Alina, and she is in the army, and the army is being sent into the Shadowfold. The Shadowfold is this huge area of unnatural darkness. And in it there are beasts and monsters that make the journey very deadly. So when they're crossing the Shadowfold, her convoy is attacked, and in a moment of desperation, she releases these powers that she did not know she possessed. And after that, she finds herself thrust into this magical order of beings known as the Grisha. Buddy reading this with Penelope was awesome. And while we decided the second half of this book was infinitely better than the first half and that it definitely shows promise, we think that there are a lot of problems with this first book that keep it from being great. The structure and the world building of this story wasn't very successful, especially in the beginning. At first there is an initial conflict with Alina discovering that she has these powers and all that, but after that the story kind of plateaus a little bit. But when it picks up again, it starts turning really, really amazing, and I definitely love the themes and the messages that run throughout this story a lot. So I ended up giving this book a 3 out of 5 stars, and I am really interested in reading the second book. I hope it only gets better. And once I finished with that, I picked up a graphic novel that I got from my library called ZAHRA'S Paradise by Amir and Khalil. So this is a story that talks a lot about Iran's controversial elections back in 2009. It follows the fictional story of a young man who disappears soon after participating in a protest. The story follows his mother and his brother, who is a blogger and the person who is narrating the story, as they try desperately to figure out what's happened to him. That's basically the story, and it is not for the faint of heart. This story has extreme displays of violence and brutality, rape, public executions. There are some sexual scenes and that kind of stuff. There are some aspects of the story that could be better written, but I think the point of this story is obviously the message of the story, and that's something that I can respect. Also, the artwork is amazing. The way some of these pages are designed, the layout, and the way the art is, I think is very powerful. And I really enjoyed it, so I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read after that is really interesting, and that is Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas by Hunter S. Thompson. It's about a character named Duke who is a doctor of journalism and his attorney who take what is possibly the craziest trip to Las Vegas. And they're sent there to cover this racing event for the magazine that this journalist works for. And they feel like the most efficient way to do this is to get whacked out of their minds on drugs. But in an extremely ironic twist, instead of wanting him to cover the race, Duke gets a telegram instructing him to cover the district attorney's conference for drugs and narcotics. And what do you think they do in order to help them cover it? They take more drugs. It's pure insanity, and it doesn't let you go from the first sentence until the end. There is not a single lull in this book. There is not a moment when it gets slow, because obviously these guys are amped up on all kinds of drugs and alcohol, etc. And this book as well is not for the faint of heart, because besides the excessive drug use and alcohol use, these guys have absolutely no boundaries. If you like things like Chuck Palahniuk or A Clockwork Orange, this would be a really good fit for you. You really have to read it carefully to see what it's going for, and I really, really appreciated it. So I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars, and I actually really enjoyed it a lot. The penultimate book that I read in June was Party Princess by Meg Cabot. It's so funny. Meg Cabot's writing style is smart, it's witty, and I love it so much. Of course, the protagonist, Mia, is super overdramatic and neurotic to the nth degree. She worries about and freaks out over every little thing that happens in her life, and that's kind of what makes this series so hilarious. And of course, this book is the one that has the infamous sexy dance of doom. And if you have no idea what that is, maybe you should read the series. Just saying. And I gave this book a 4.5 out of 5 stars, and I can't wait to reread the next one soon. And the last thing I read this month, I swear, is the first volume of a manga series called Pandora Hearts, and this is by Jun Mochizuki. This manga follows the story of a young boy named Oz. He and his closest relatives, friends, and associates are visiting this very fine old mansion because he is going to be having his coming of age ceremony for turning 15. At the peak of the ceremony, Oz is taken into what is known as the Abyss. The Abyss is in another dimension, and it's a dark empty place full of nothing but strange, creepy things, and it's where criminals are sent for their sins. The only thing that Oz is told before he gets thrown into the abyss is that his sin is his very being. I really enjoyed the first volume of this story. I think the characters show a lot of promise. I think they're very dynamic, even though it's early on in the series. I also feel like the story has a really nice mix of humor and creepiness, because obviously there's something very haunting about it. I'm really eager to see where the series is going, and I'm excited to continue it hopefully next month. But I gave the first volume of Pandora Hearts 4 out of 5 stars. I have a stitch in my side. I've been talking for so long. Definitely let me know in the comments what are some of the highlights of your reading month in June, or what are you looking forward to reading in July. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you on the flip side of the page. Bye.